where did I put that checklist? Oh, this is a Cub. I don't even have a stinking checklist. And that makes the Cub the perfect airplane to explore yet again one of those favorite topics of aviation writers, the runway turnback or the impossible turn. About once a month we run out of stuff to write about, so we drag out this dead horse and beat it some more, hoping that the laws of aerodynamics and physics have changed since the last time we looked at it. Well, that ain't going to happen. But since I got the Cub cam set up, let's take a whack at it.
There are two schools of thought here, the Boy Scouts and the steely-eyed test pilots. The Boy Scouts stick with the script. If the engine quits, they do what they've been taught, which is to land maybe 30 degrees either side of straight ahead. It's a no-brainer if you can keep from stalling, which evidently some of us can't. But what if the potential landing area looks like this? Nothing but houses and power poles or worse. The steely-eyed test pilot might now try for the runway turnback maneuver. A great day for you if it works, a bad one for your insurance company if it doesn't.
But it's not as simple as that. You've got to have enough altitude not just to make the turn back, but to line up with the opposite runway. And what is that altitude? Well, I can't tell you. It's going to vary with the airplane, the wind, and the runway length, and how jiggy you want to get with that turn.
Wind is a big factor here. A good headwind on takeoff will give you a greater climb gradient, so you'll be higher closer into the runway. In the Cub, I can consider turning back from maybe 300 feet, but in most airplanes it'll be more like 500 feet, but it could just as well be 700 feet, and the only way to figure this out is to practice it and see what works.
And let's not kid ourselves about the risk here. You'll be doing steep banks at low altitude. The consequences of messing it up are pretty substantial. And don't forget your fellow pattern dwellers. They're likely to freak out when you do this, so make sure you do it on a quiet day at the airport. The critical thing is deciding whether to turn back or not. Some instructors say when you're practicing this, you should wait 3 seconds after your simulated engine failure to start the turn. That accounts for the inevitable delay when your brain is mush after an emergency happens. But when you think about it, that's kind of dumb. It's like practicing bleeding. You should really make the turn back decision not here, but here before you even take off. On every takeoff, just tell yourself that this time the engine is really, no kidding, going to quit, then be glad when it doesn't. Consider the wind and runway options and what you'll do if you lose power. If the engine really does quit, you'll be spring-loaded to act. You don't have to start the turn instantly. There's time to consider that, but you do need to get the nose down right now so you'll have energy for the turn. Here's what it looks like in the Cub. Most people who have tried this recommend about a 45-degree bank angle, and that's about right. You don't have to hurry to turn much, so avoid overbanking and let the nose fall through a little to keep the energy up. Scrubbing ahead here, it's common to see this. The problem usually isn't making it back to the runway. It's being too high and close in after 220 degrees of reverse turn.
And let's just hold it right there. What he forgot to tell you is that when you're landing downwind, your ground speed will be higher than it would be if you just landed straight ahead. This graph shows you how the crash energy goes up with the square of the speed. And that might be the difference between bumping slowly through the weeds off the end of the runway and crashing into something hard a lot faster. That very same wind that gave you enough climb gradient to make the turn back is now pushing you faster towards the end of the opposite runway. That's another thing to think about.
Well, I was going to get to that, but I'm a little busy here dealing with this too high, too fast situation. Now, I could use an aggressive slip, or if I had delayed the turn a couple seconds on the turn back, I'd be further out and I wouldn't have this problem. But this is too short to land on, at least for practice, though. We'll be going around.
At some airports, there might be other options like a cross runway or one angled more favorably for a turn. And in a real emergency, any port and storm, the airport infield is fair game. You might beat up the airplane a little, but you'll survive it.
Well, big surprise. The laws of aerodynamics related to the turnback maneuver haven't changed. But I do think we should stop calling it the impossible turn. As you can see from this video, it's not impossible at all. How about we call it the maybe turn? Maybe you should consider doing this, maybe you shouldn't, and maybe I can't even advise you. But I do have two suggestions. First of all, if you're going to consider using the turnback turn, you should have practiced it ahead of time. You're unlikely to pull this off in the heat of the moment if you've never done it before. And second, consider runway length, wind, and obstacles, and think through the decision to turn back before you even take off. That way you won't turn into a quivering lump of lard if the engine actually does quit. But then again, we should apply that kind of planning to all kinds of flying, not just the turn back maneuver. For AVweb, I'm Paul Bertorelli. See you next time. And thanks to John King for looking over my shoulder.